Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today, we have Pam Sanderson from the Passumpsic Bank, and she's here to talk about fraud. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Good morning.
And let's start off. What is your title?
I am the branch operations and risk administrator.
Right. You contacted me. One of your colleagues did, and I thought this was a great idea for a show because the concept of scams, they're evolving so much. I've got to the point now where you have to prove to me you're legit just about
Absolutely.
in everything. And I often, because I work with older people, I often think, how do these people navigate this world?
There's so much to it. And like you said, with the technology out there, it's hard to really know who you're working with and who you're talking with.
Right. Yeah. I often have said it's really too bad that some of these people didn't get real jobs, like in IT or something, because some of them are quite ingenious.
Yes, they definitely have the skill set where they'd be successful as normal jobs.
Right. So what is your message you would like to get out there about this problem and how to protect yourself?
So I think the biggest message we have is your local banks, your local contacts, they're there to help and protect you. They're not there to tell you to take your money out, lie to your bankers, those types of things. So we're really here to help protect consumers. We want them to know of the new frauds and the scams that are happening. Family members, community members, it affects all ages and all facets. So we're really here to help educate and protect our customers.
Right. Even at only 60, every once in a while I fawn for the old days where, like, I remember when I first started banking 40 years ago, I used to be able to go in, if it was a small loan, I could go into the banker. He'd actually give me the money, just, a small loan for a couple thousand. And then I could bring the paperwork home, fill it out, and then bring it back.
Right?
Those days are done. Sometimes they're frustrating, but there's often a reason for it.
Absolutely. And back when I started my banking career almost 36 years ago, our biggest thing we saw was counterfeit currency.
Right.
And now that obviously is the least of what we see. Now
Yeah,
it's the
let's
bigger fraud.
Right. Yeah, you have a lot of institutional knowledge on this topic because, I assume you almost grew up in the world of banking.
I did. I
Right.
did.
Right. So did you start out as a teller?
I did start out as a teller fresh out of high school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my career, and I started at the bank.
Right.
And here we
So
are today.
So when you were a teller back 36 years ago, what were you told to look for, or were you told to look for anything, as in like scams? It was just counterfeit?
It was just counterfeit currency. So back then, fraud and scams were nowhere near. Obviously, we're at, pandemic, epidemic, proportions at this point, but it was really counterfeit currency. So the first time we saw wire fraud or check fraud, it really was eye-opening because it wasn't what we ever imagined was coming.
Right. Well, we found it interesting, as you know, just getting you on this show virtually uh,
Correct.
was a challenge. The usual program we used, your bank, apparently your security system wouldn't allow us to access you. So we had to go
Correct.
to one that your bank was more accustomed with. So, which tells me even your internet access is secure.
It is. It is. Obviously, being a financial institution, we're going to take all of those extra steps that we can to protect our customers' information.
Right. So, um, so what were the first kind of scams that you remember starting to come about, other than the fake money?
So I think the initial one we saw was customers that were taken advantage of via fraud,
Right.
by wire. So they thought they were purchasing property or they were making a purchase in another way, and they sent money via wire transfer. Well, the money sent by wire, once it's gone, it's gone. The bank cannot retrieve that money back. So that was the very first one that I remember is wire fraud. Then it became checks where they were making checks to appear like the actual account owner's check and negotiating those items. Of course, you always have forgeries, things like that then came along. More recently, it's been whitewashing of checks, so they actually intercept mail, legitimate checks, and whitewash to make them payable to someone else. So that's been more counterfeit treasurer's checks and money orders. They appear as if they're legitimate items. And
Right.
now we get more into the IRS text messages or the toll booth text messages or vendors, reaching out, things like that. So it's really evolving and it's evolving quite quickly.
I just barely got one of those toll booth ones, and I said to myself, "Wait a minute! I just paid because I travel a lot, and then I said, wait, no, I don't owe that."
Right.
And but
They're not going to send text messages. And if you really think about it, how would they have your cell phone number?
right,
Those are things where they're taking the image, they're putting it in the mail based on your license plate
right,
that it captures. So they're not going to send you text messages. But if they get some to respond,
right.
that is working.
Actually, I will say this. I actually have it set up with them. So, because you can with the toll people, you can set it up that through their thing where you actually do get a text message.
Yes,
And
where you've
so,
established that connection first.
right. And but it was funny. I still think somehow they were able to get that information and then send me a fake one.
See, I got the fake one and I don't go through toll booths.
Right, right, right.
So,
Hey, I got to tell you though, even the you can get now, well, you can get scammed. Well, his weren't so much a scam, but I have a son-in-law who he put his credit card in I think it was a gas station thing, and there was a card reader in it, and I kind of chuckled out of it. The reason I kind of laughed is he's a federal credit union auditor,
oh no,
and then they they got him,
they did.
but he didn't know it, and
No, and again, they're more enhanced and they're hard to detect in many, many areas, which is why we just launched a new fleet of ATMs with
right,
new technology trying to keep up on the fraud.
right. Um, all right, now fast forward. Now, if you're, what are your tellers? Are they are they much more trained than anything you would have been trained in? Like, what are they trained to look for?
So, what we train is really knowing our customer, asking questions. Is that activity normal for that customer? Do they appear evasive or under duress? Are they
Right,
upset? Are there other things going on? So many times you'll have questions, are you doing projects around the house? What are you utilizing this for? Are you doing something fun with this withdrawal? And when they start talking about visiting family members out of state, with a small community, many of these people, that they don't have adult children that live out of state. So it really is just having that conversation and trying to get to understand what the transaction is. At the end of the day, it is their money, and they can
Right.
certainly do what they choose to with their money. But it's really discussing the different fraud things that we see and asking a lot more questions, unusual questions. If Scott's standing in front of me, I'm probably going to ask Scott some questions about his family or his recent vacation that we knew because we had a conversation last week.
Right. Right. The as I was telling you before, I have a friend whose mother is well in her 90s and she still lives on her own because she insists and she wants nobody else involved in her
Right.
money. Uh, Fortunately, she's well off, but she lost many, many thousands of dollars to a friend who called her, and it was a scammer. And I don't even think she really minds that she gave because it was a friend, so
Right.
she's okay. And
Right.
but do you find like I find particularly older people, this really confuses them. Do you have people come to you or to your bank and just say, is this real?
Absolutely. And it happens on a regular basis. And like you said, they become friends. So many times they've been speaking with this individual for a year or 2 years before any ask of money comes up. So at that point, when we say, do you know this person? They're going to respond, yes, I do. I've been communicating with them for the last 2 years. So in their mind, it's not a stranger. It isn't somebody that's trying to take advantage of them. It truly is a friend, someone
Right.
they have that relationship with. Unfortunately, with the technology that's available, they could have on-screen conversations, but you could be virtual. You may not even be a person that you're talking to on the other side of the screen. So AI has really changed that where it doesn't mean that it's an actual person that you're communicating with, even though you have that image.
That's even, I'm not a great technology person, but because of my work, I need to use it. But AI still just baffles
It
me.
does.
I have a friend who's very much into AI, and I'm going to have him on the show sometime, trying to not only explain to the world about AI, but trying to explain to me because my brain cannot grasp how they do all of that.
Right. So they're really the only way to know that they're an actual person is to sit across the dinner table from them, to actual see somebody in person. Because with the virtual reality out there, they can impersonate voices, they can impersonate phone numbers. So we say don't answer the phone if you're not familiar with the number. But
Right.
if they're spoofing that number, they're familiar with that number.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I get it's funny. I get a lot of fraud phone calls from it's they for some reason it comes in on my phone as Newberry, Vermont.
Right?
I don't know how that little town came up on their radar to use Newberry.
Right. My favorite was when it came up as my name
Oh
on my home
yes.
phone.
Yeah, I don't know what
So
that's about. I haven't gotten one of those for a long time. Do you know of any real big scams that was caught at your bank because of an alert
we've
teller?
got a lot as far as dollar amounts. I don't have that in front of me, but we have absolutely helped protect customers at hundreds and hundreds of thousands, collectively. And a lot of it is just asking the questions. And if they're talking about projects that they're doing, we know in Northeast Vermont, there are certain projects you're not going to do in the wintertime. So it's asking those extra questions, getting them to think about it a little bit. When we share, oh, we know of someone else that was flying down to Florida to visit a child. It's a good time of year for that. Really planning a lot of those questions are really getting them thinking about the different things that are happening. They'll bring in checks and say, I don't know where this came from. Let's check into that. And saving it before it happens is critical. Your bank is not going to call you and identify as the fraud department and instruct you to go to the bank and take your money out. They're not going to instruct you to lie to your banker. And that's what some of them are doing. They thought, okay, I got a call from the fraud department, but I wasn't supposed to tell you. That is definitely not our fraud department. That is not the conversation that we're going to
Right.
have.
Right. This is how bad I am. I got a email from, it was a mass email. It was from my accountant. Had no private information on it, but I looked at it, and then I picked up the phone and I called them. I says, "Okay, is that you guys sending it out?" And they says, "Yep, that's us." I said, "Okay," because
Right.
no, I've learned. I have heard enough that I kind of don't trust anybody.
Correct. Verify everything. We did have customers that received what appeared to be a legitimate letter from us, had the logo, it had all of the details on the bank that was emailed to them. And they reached out and we said, this is absolutely not us. This is not something we sent to you. So they are impersonating the bank. I work with fraud victims and potential fraud victims on a regular basis, and they have my name and they have my direct line. Well, they
Right.
shared that with a fraudster, and that fraudster started sharing that information with people they were scamming. And they started using my number to call and impersonate as me, as the bank. I'm calling regarding potential fraud on your account. So it's very easy for them to impersonate, and then they go running with it. And it's all
You
ages. It's not elderly, it's not, a particular age range. They're really preying on different pieces of it, but it's unsolicited and it's expanding all the time.
right. So is there any getting your money back if
So
it's
if
fraud?
you've authorized it, if you've pushed those funds, then unfortunately that is a loss to you. It is the same as giving $100 bill to someone on the sidewalk. If there is fraud on your account because they came in and took it unauthorized, then there is protection for consumers.
Right.
Businesses would need to be enrolled. We offer a service called Positive Pay. And that's a service that businesses can sign up. There is a monthly cost associated with that, but it catches all the unauthorized transactions and returns them as fraud. Because businesses are not protected the same way consumers are.
Right. Right. You know, my I spend my life between Derby and Marquette, Michigan, where my daughter lives. And over in Marquette here, it wasn't a bank, but it was a fraud, and it ended up um, being tragic. Is this young man thought he was online with a young woman, and he exposed himself, and uh, and then they came out and said, okay, we have these photos, and now we're going to send them to your family if you don't send
Right.
us $1,500. And this young senior, this young guy with the world ahead of him, chose to commit suicide.
Oh,
And the two brothers from Nigeria, maybe Nigeria, they were actually tracked down and convicted here in the city, and they're serving quite a number of years. Now, granted, that's not bank fraud, but that was a similar thing, and the young man thought it was the end of his life, and yeah, it made national
absolutely.
news.
Wow. And it's affecting all different areas, not just banking.
Right. So what are you doing about it? What are you putting into place to, well, of what you can
Right.
say,
So
I
one of
guess.
the things is continuing to educate our staff on
Right.
what to look for, what questions to ask for, because it's changing all the time.
Right.
We have from, reaching out that your fraud department said to take all my money out of the bank and send it for safekeeping to them.
Right.
The bank is not going to ask that. So it's really educating our front line, educating our communities, doing interviews such as this, conversations. We have different opportunities to go into our schools and get out into our communities. At Thanksgiving time, I said to every friend I have, talk about this at the dinner table. When you have your family sitting around that dinner table, don't talk politics. Don't talk about those other things. Talk about fraud and how to protect each other. Get that word out. And like you said, don't trust. Verify and validate. And if any questions come up, talk with your banker that you've worked with for decades.
Right.
Talk with local law enforcement before you act, before you give anybody anything.
Right. You know, one thing I've noticed at my bank is now that, well, first of all, when I don't know how old you are, but I'm 60. Now, as the older generation, our generation and older retire, they're replaced by kids, as in like they're young, and I don't mean that negative, but suddenly I'm a stranger to them, and so um, because some of the older ones are gone, they don't know who at least when they start. So I'm now having to answer more questions the first
Correct.
or second time because they don't, especially I do a lot of banking also or a lot of questions by phone. And they have me go through now, like I think three different questions, before they give anything, and
Right.
it never used to be like that.
It
But
didn't. And truly, if you're by phone, we don't know that that's Scott Wheeler calling in. So relying on what we used to rely on your voice. We can't rely on your voice anymore because that can be duplicated. We can't just ask your birth date or a couple of questions. So we're much deeper than three questions now, and they're much more relationship based and specific to you and your account activity versus you as a person. How
right,
many of us play those Facebook games with all the questions and we answer all of these identity questions? What school did you go to? What street did you grow up on? How old are you? When is your birthday? So a lot of that information's out on social media. So we have to go in other route to make sure that we have the right person. Many times, if we truly are not comfortable, we're going to ask them to come to the local branch.
right,
Come in because we really aren't sure that we've got the right person.
right. Um, so tell me, you mentioned like those questionnaires on Facebook, and I've heard some people say don't do that. Is that really a concern? I don't do it myself, but is that a legitimate concern that people not take part in those little games where people are asking different questions?
So really, in my opinion, you're putting more information out there, more private information that may be questions to identify at a credit union, at another bank, at another institution somewhere where it may be what's your favorite color, what's your first pet's name, what is the street you grew up on or the graded school that you attended. Those could be questions that are asked to identify.
Right. Yeah. No, it kind of, I hate to say it, kind of sucks that you have to go through life
Right.
like this now, but, and it's interesting, with my kids, we kind of reverse roles. Sometimes particularly my sons, they try to educate me, but I think dad's pretty educated when it comes to these things. But
Right.
I maybe I'm not.
And I think it truly goes back to if it sounds too good to be true.
Right,
There isn't anyone out there that's going to just give you money or gift cards. That's another one. I know the local stores will even ask when you purchase gift cards. The
right,
IRS does not take payment in gift cards. You cannot buy plane tickets with gift cards. That's not a source of payment for many, many out there. So
right,
if you're asked to pay in gift cards, that's something that really should be a red flag.
yeah.
Giving money, lawsuits that take 30 days to 60 days to settle. Anything like that that sounds too good to be true is too good to be true.
What is the uh is the state is in the case of Vermont, is Vermont trying to do anything to crack down on it, or is there anything the state government can do?
I don't know about the state government. I know the all the financial institutions are coming together saying we've got to have a bigger message. We've got to be able to reach consumers
Right.
to not provide the information that they're providing. It's really protect yourselves, but it's that level where we all are getting together and saying, what do we do? How do we stop this? The romance scams, the grandparent scams, they prey on fear. And one scam is calling grandparents in the middle of the night and letting them know that their grandchild is now in trouble. And you can't discuss it. You're under a gag order. We've given you details, but you need to meet us with cash to post bail. They're
Right.
preying on that fear in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
Call
yeah,
the
I've heard it.
parents, call the local law enforcement. They can verify whether that grandchild is really in trouble.
We have about 5 more minutes left. What more would you like to tell the listeners?
So I think part of it is again, just trust your bank that you chose to work with. There's a reason that you're working with them and they're there to protect. They're there to help educate. Ask questions. If it doesn't seem right, ask your local banker. Ask your
Right.
local law enforcement. Share this with your friends, your family, your neighbors, your community, and really have those open conversations of if it sounds too good to be true, you need to question it even further. Watch for those red flags. Are that family member or friend becoming more isolated? Suddenly appearing to have financial troubles that they didn't have before? Is there a new friend that's in this picture that maybe is doesn't have the best interest for them? And really just be aware.
Right.
I mean, this is
In
costing the United States billions. Federal Trade Commission losses in the US topped $23.7 billion last year.
And is there much of a, when people are caught, which I suspect isn't very often, is there what happens to them?
So I'm not aware of many that have been caught. This role, I'm really just kind of diving more into the stats and the details. There was a recent posting that there was a large ring that was based out of Canada with the grandparents scam that was caught. But other than that, it's hard to tell what will happen, what the consequences will be.
Right. Yeah. No, it's really too bad that they won't have productive lives. And they probably ruin quite a few lives. So I
And if
feel,
you picture a large warehouse, this is real. They're sitting in large warehouses, everyone's on phones, and it's a game. And let's see if we can tear at the heartstrings and get some money out of someone.
right. Okay, well, we have got to wrap it up, but I think it was great that you reached out to me. You folks reached out to me because I knew this was a problem. I even knew it was a growing problem, but I never even thought about reaching out to a bank, which I
Right.
appreciate you folks being proactive with it.
Great. And we'd love to be out in the community. So anyone that wants us to come in and talk to classes and groups, we'd love it.
Yeah, I never thought about that being is your role, but in this day and age, I think it's just so important with so many scammers out there.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for coming on,
Thank you.
and thank you for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.